In 1986, Nintendo released a title for the NES known as Metroid, a game that heavily featured exploration as a primary focus. The series would go on to inspire games very similar to it, such as 1997's Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a game that heavily featured the exploration elements Metroid was known for. Over the years, many games have been developed in this style, now referred to as Metroidvania. And today's topic is one such title, Moon Studios' Ori and the Blind Forest. But first, some history. Ori and the Blind Forest was developed by Moon Studios, a company based in Austria, but the team itself collaborates over the internet instead of within a single location, and the team recruits from all over the world. The game we now know as Ori and the Blind Forest started life as a game simply titled Sign. About 1 year into its 4-year development, the game was acquired and funded by Microsoft. At some point during development, the game was retitled to Ori and the Blind Forest. The name Sign would be reused for the small orb of light that acts as Ori's guide throughout the game. After 4 years of development, the game would be published by Microsoft Studios, now known as Xbox Game Studios, for the PC and Xbox One in March of 2015. The game later received an updated version titled the Definitive Edition the following year, with a Nintendo Switch release occurring in September of 2019. The version I'll be reviewing is the Xbox One version, but I'll also be discussing the Nintendo Switch version as well. The story opens up during a dark and stormy night where a glowing leaf separates itself from the Spirit Tree, the guardian and voice of the Forest of Nibel. The leaf passes by this creature named Naru, and upon landing, the leaf takes the form of this creature of light named Ori. Seeing no one else, Naru decides to raise the creature as her own. For some time, Ori and Naru live peacefully and all seems to be well. However, one day, the Spirit Tree unleashes a flash of light as a means to locate Ori, but is taken by Naru back to their cave. It's not exactly clear if Naru knows what this flash means or not. However, not long after this, the forest begins to fall into a state of decay for unknown reasons. As the forest around them dies, Naru herself also passes away due to both the decay and starvation, leaving Ori heartbroken by the loss. Ori leaves the cave but doesn't make it very far before succumbing to weariness. The Spirit Tree senses this and uses the last bit of its power to revive Ori, who sets out once again. Ori eventually comes across Sign, a small orb of light that is also the light of the Spirit Tree itself. Sign explains that the night the Spirit Tree called out to Ori and others, a dark entity known as Kuro attacked. Kuro ripped Sign from the Spirit Tree and disrupted the 3 elements of light, which caused Nibel to begin decaying. The only remaining guardian spirit, it now falls to Ori to save Nibel from its grim fate. To do this, Ori must restore the 3 elements of light. The element of water located within the Ginzo tree to the east, the element of winds in the Forlorn Ruins to the west, and the element of warmth inside Mount Haru to the north. On their way to the Ginzo tree, the pair encounter a Gumon named Gumo who takes the water vein from the Ginzo tree, having given in to despair some time ago. Gumo actively impedes Ori's progress, but when saved from a rock slide, Gumo gives them the water vein as thanks. The two succeed in restoring the element of water to Nibel, but soon after they encounter Kuro, who nearly ends them, but they are saved by Gumo at the last second. The two then make their way to Misty Woods to unlock the path to the Forlorn Ruins to restore the wind element. When they reach the ruins, they find it encased in ice, with the Gumon having perished because of it, leaving Gumo the last of his people, something he unfortunately discovers when he follows Ori to the ruins. Upon hearing that they will honor the memory of the Gumon by restoring the wind element and Nibel, Gumo decides to repay their earlier kindness and takes the Gumon's light vessel and makes his way out of the ruins. Ori and Sign also escape and stumble upon Kuro's nest, where they soon discover the truth behind her actions. The night the Spirit Tree called to Ori, Kuro was seen caring for her owlets, and while she was away, the Spirit Tree's light began to flash. Kuro hurried back to the nest, but was too late to save her children. And in her rage, she attacked the Spirit Tree, setting the game's events into motion. Kuro then returns to her nest with the pair only barely escaping her. Ori then retrieves the Sunstone from the Sorrow Pass, and it's here that we learn that Gumo used the light vessel from the ruins to revive Naru, with the two now setting off to find Ori. Ori and Sign make their way through Mount Haru, but just as Sign begins to restore the element of warmth, Kuro attacks again, with the two once again barely escaping her. They then try to reach the Spirit Tree, but Kuro knocks Ori unconscious and prevents Sign from reaching the tree. Naru makes her way to Ori and holds them, much like she did at the beginning. Seeing this, Kuro remembers her own loss and notices that the wildfires threaten her last egg. She places Sign back into the Spirit Tree, which restores the forest, and the rain puts out the fires, but at the cost of her own life. Ori is seen watching new forest spirits begin to appear, and Gumo is now seen living with Ori and Naru, the three now something of a family. Naru returns to the cave where she raised Ori, and we now see that she's taken in Kuro's egg, where it begins to hatch. The story in this game is one that I find very well done. One detail that I quite like is that outside of Sign and the Spirit Tree sometimes giving us important details, the story is mostly told without any dialogue. The game relies on its characters' facial and body language and its environment to tell the story. Outside of certain details, the story is done in a way that doesn't require words to convey, or at the very least, very few words. And to me, it allows the emotional moments to be that much more impactful. One character I'd like to draw attention to is Kuro. While the game makes it clear that she's the villain in this story, once you know her story, you feel for her. While it doesn't make her right, her anger is one that we can understand, and when loved ones are lost, it can make anyone lose themselves to despair or anger. And in the end, even she sees what she's become because of this and makes an attempt to atone, even if it does cost her life in the end. The story isn't what I would call original, as it's essentially a story about an orphan that learns about their destiny and becomes a hero, but I did find it well executed, so to me, that's all that matters. Since Ori and the Blind Forest is considered a Metroidvania, its gameplay largely takes after games of that style. The game is a platform adventure game with a large emphasis on exploration. Every area in this game has something for Ori to discover, such as hidden pathways or an item to improve Ori's chances of surviving the dangers of Nibel. The forest is full of dangers that Ori must overcome to restore the light and stop the decay. Enemies, spikes, crushing stones, and beams of energy. However, Ori is far from defenseless. Once Ori meets up with Sign, they gain the Spirit Flame. This attack will automatically lock onto the nearest target, allowing Ori to dodge oncoming attacks while also unleashing attacks of their own. The attack does what it needs to, but it can be upgraded using Spirit Light, golden orbs of light that, when enough are collected, become ability points for Ori to use. By pressing B at either a Spirit Well or at a created Soul Link, you can access the ability tree to spend ability points to upgrade Ori's abilities. The ability tree is divided into 3 branches: the red Combat branch, the purple Efficiency branch, and the blue Utility branch. The Combat branch increases the power of Spirit Flame, allowing it to cause more damage and attack multiple enemies at once. It also increases the blast radius and power of Charge Flame and the Stomp attack. The Utility branch increases the efficiency of certain abilities Ori will learn across their journey, while also providing other bonuses such as increased defense, the ability to breathe underwater, and decrease the energy cost of Soul Link. The Efficiency branch grants Ori passive abilities that are mostly used for exploration but are highly useful. For instance, certain skills will allow you to see where certain pickups are located on the map, such as ability or life cells. And the final ability, Sense, causes hidden walls to appear semi-transparent, making them more obvious. Needless to say, this branch is incredibly useful, especially if attempting to 100% the game. Hidden in many areas around Nibel are optional pickups for Ori to discover. Most of the time it's Spirit Light, but other times you'll find one of 3 types of cells. Life cells, which increase Ori's maximum health, energy cells, which increase Ori's maximum spirit energy, and finally ability cells, which grant Ori a single ability point to use on the ability tree. All of these items are generally well hidden, but they're well worth the effort it takes to find them, although certain cells do require certain abilities to gain access to. Throughout Ori's journey, they'll come across ancestral trees containing the spirits and abilities of fallen spirits of Nibel. By absorbing their light, Ori gains their abilities. For the most part, each of these abilities are used for exploration, such as allowing Ori to climb up walls or stomp to push down certain switches. Each of these abilities are used to gain access to new areas or discover hidden items. However, a large portion of these abilities can also be used to give Ori more options to take down enemies. The Bash ability, for instance, is typically used on lanterns and allow Ori to essentially bounce off of them to gain more height to access areas they otherwise can't on their own. However, Bash can also be used on enemies and projectiles. By timing Bash just right, Ori can actually redirect an enemy projectile either away or back at the enemy who sent it. And by using the ability at the right time, Bash can also be used to send enemies into environmental hazards such as spikes. And while bashing, time stops for about 3 seconds, allowing you to pick which direction to bash towards. With proper use, this ability is actually among the most powerful abilities in the game. And the same applies to the charge jump and the stomp attack. As I said, most of Ori's abilities have a use beyond their intended use, so by experimenting a little bit, Ori gains more attack options beyond just the Spirit Flame. However, among Ori's most useful abilities is Soul Link. By holding B, Ori creates a small blue flame in that spot that not only allows Ori to access the ability tree, but it also saves the game at the cost of 1 unit of spirit energy, less if you spend points on the right ability in the utility branch. I really like this ability to save anywhere because spirit wells, which are this game's save points, are quite spaced out, which makes them a bit unreliable unless you happen to be nearby. And if you're faced with a tough section, it's nice to be able to save at the start of it should you mess up. And in general, the ability to save anywhere at any time is just incredibly convenient. There are multiple areas across the Forest of Nibel for Ori to explore. The Sunken Glades, Hollow Grove, Moon Grotto, Thornfelt Swamp, the Ginzo Tree, the Valley of the Wind, Misty Woods, the Forlorn Ruins, Sorrow Pass, and finally Mount Haru. If you have the Definitive Edition, 2 new areas are added, those being Blackroot Burrows and the Lost Grove. The most common obstacle you'll encounter in each of these areas are spikes, although each area does challenge the player in a different way, typically through the use of one of Ori's abilities. For instance, Misty Woods requires Ori to not only use the climb ability that they receive here, but it also challenges them in effective use of the bash ability and Kurdo's Feather. The Forlorn Ruins offers a different challenge by using this light vessel to traverse over dangerous surfaces and even walk on walls while carrying it, making the ruins one giant puzzle. And you have to be careful where and how you jump or you may find yourself in spikes. And Sorrow Pass mostly makes use of Kurdo's Feather due to the wind currents, but it also tests how well you've mastered older abilities. In general, I think each area of this game is really well designed and I like the challenges each one offers. And what makes it all the better is Ori's control. Ori's controls feel very smooth and responsive and they don't feel too light or too heavy. And with all of the various movement abilities, it makes Ori an absolute blast to control. Though, admittedly, I do sometimes lose control of myself when I gain these abilities because I like going fast in this game, and when you have all of these abilities, it can sometimes make it easy to lose control of yourself and make stupid mistakes. With mistakes comes defeat, and should you lose all of your health, you're sent back to the last save point. However, this game doesn't actually use lives, instead only tracking the amount of times that you've died. Because of this, death is essentially a non-issue, though it's still possible to feel annoyed or frustrated regardless. As far as difficulty, the game isn't terribly hard, but it does have its moments where it can get frustrating. But despite that, I find the game's difficulty for the most part manageable, especially with its lack of lives. In regards to presentation, this game is amazing. The visuals in this game alone are what I'd consider 10 out of 10 quality. Everything is brimming with detail and life, and everything has a very distinct look to it. The characters and enemies all animate incredibly well, and everything runs at a consistently smooth 60 frames per second. And the sound design is also phenomenal. While I honestly can't remember much of the soundtrack, when you're actually playing the game, the music really enhances everything. The game has a nice assortment of atmospheric, tense, intense, and emotional tracks, and they all work so well. I simply cannot praise this game's presentation enough, it's simply fantastic. 1 year after its initial release, the game received an enhanced version titled the Definitive Edition. This version added new power-ups and new areas in addition to some new backstory for Naru. It also added some quality of life changes as well as new difficulty options such as One Life mode, one of the hardest challenges in the game. In 2019, the game was also released on the Nintendo Switch due to a good working relationship between Microsoft and Nintendo. From what I'm able to tell, there's essentially no visual difference between the Xbox version and the Switch version, looking and playing just as well. Only the Switch version has the benefit of also being able to be played on a handheld device. And because the Nintendo Switch lacks a dedicated achievement system, the achievements are instead integrated into the game itself. The Definitive Edition is currently the only way to experience this game now, as the original was delisted some time ago. But with all these changes and additions, it certainly lives up to its title. Ori and the Blind Forest is a fantastic game. The controls are smooth, the level design is great, and the visuals and sound design are superb. And while the story isn't particularly original, it's still very enjoyable, and to me, that's what's most important. This is a game I've gone back to and beaten numerous times for various reasons, and I've even gone out of my way to fully complete this game, something I don't do for every game I play. If you're looking for an amazingly beautiful Metroidvania, then look no further than Ori and the Blind Forest. Whether on PC, Xbox One, or Nintendo Switch, this game is well worth your time and money. Our adventures with Ori don't stop here, so when next we meet, we'll be taking a look at Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Until then, take care everyone.